Okay, class, for our session today, let's start it by offering this time to God. We praise you, O God, Lord, over our lives. Guide us today, protect us today, help us to live for you. We dedicate this time for you. Be exalted in us. Give us wisdom and understanding. All these we pray in Christ's name. Amen. Okay, so to start off, I would like you to choose an emoticon. There's lots of emoticons in YouTube Live. Choose an emoticon that expresses your condition today, your emotion, your feeling. How are you today? Express it through the emoticon in YouTube. So choose your emoticon to express how you feel. So si Andre, si Levin, okay, okay lang. Si Olive, parang pawis na pawis, ha? Ano yun, Ingrid Bangag? Bangag ba yung gano'n? Si Anna Nicole, mukhang na-stress siya. Okay, thank you all for your emoticons. I hope we could continue. So English for specific purposes, or ESP, uh, is a very specific use of English, or teaching of English. So ESP started as specialized English programs in the 1960s with lexis, or vocabulary or expressions, as the focus. And it involves pragmatic approaches. It doesn't involve theoretical study of language. It doesn't study too much on grammar. Rather, it discusses or focuses on very practical uses of English. And as a way of teaching English, it uses realistic materials for meaningful use. So everything is really geared towards the specific purpose. Now, there are 5 stages of the history and development of ESP. The first stage concerns the concept of special language. It focuses on register analysis. I'm sure you have experienced watching different occupations, nurses, medical personnel, crime scene investigators, drivers. They all use uh, they all use specific register. Okay, so they all use specific register. Then the next stage should be beyond the sentence, rhetorical or discourse analysis. The idea is what are the what are the stuff beyond sentences, beyond mere words that you can use for a particular purpose in ESP. So you analyze the rhetoric, you analyze the discourse. Then there is the stage where the idea is to focus on the target situation. What is the situation? And actually, even in different occupations, there are different situations. So, what do you say? How do you talk in a given situation? Then there is the stage of focusing on skills and strategies because communication can be compensated for even if you're not very good in in talking. You use strategies and skills. And then there is the learning centered approach. What is the learning centered approach? How is that different from from learner centered approach? Okay, when we say learning centered approach, the idea is building even more difficult tasks. So it's like physical education. Well, you start with a step test, and then after some time, the players are already used to that, so it's not a problem for them anymore. They don't derive the kind of exercise that they need. So what you do is you make the task a little more difficult. So in the case of ESP, you focus on more specific, challenging tasks. Okay? So what is English for specific purposes? According to Hutchison and Waters, it's actually an approach rather than a product. The focus is not on the product but on the approach. And it does not involve a particular kind of language, teaching material, or methodology. So it involves language and teaching material or methodology that is actually specific to the need. So your biggest question is, why does this learner need to learn a foreign language? Why do they need to learn that particular language? Okay, what do students need to do? So think about the task I asked you to do. Okay, what do students need to do with English? Which of the skills do they need to master and how well? So, for example, in the case of news reporters, they probably need to master the concept of backshifting. So, you were my students in structure of English. You understand the concept of backshifting. You understand the concept of reported speech. And what genres do they need to master either for comprehension or production purposes? Okay, the genre, the text type, it could be commands, it could be describing situations, it could be giving a narrative report. What are those genres? Or maybe the kind of talk used in medical technology. They all have different genres, and it's those genres that those text types that students need to master for comprehension or production purposes. Now, Stephen has given absolute characteristics of ESP. Number one, it's an absolute characteristic that it's designed to meet specified needs of the learner. So it's not general English, it's specific to the needs of the learner, whatever that need is. It's related in content to particular disciplines, occupations, and activities. So maybe it's for doctors, maybe it's for the operating table, maybe it's for miners, for identifying specific rock formations. Maybe it's for pilots. For example, the pilot needs to land. How does a pilot talk when it comes to landing? It's centered on language appropriate to those activities in syntax, lexis, discourse semantics, and so on, and analysis of discourse. So you use the language that's specifically appropriate to such activities. Maybe vocabulary, maybe syntax, maybe discourse. So do you use a lot of embedded questions? Do you use a lot of conditionals? So it's in contrast with general English. Now there are variable characteristics of ESP. If there are absolute characteristics, there are variable characteristics. ESP may be restricted as to the learning skills to be learned. So it's variable. It depends on the learning skills. And ESP may not be taught according to any preordained methodology. Okay, don't need to insist on total physical response. No need to insist on suggestopedia. No need to insist on the silent way or communicative language teaching, or even audiolingualism. So here is an example of the tree of ELT. The basic is the idea of learning communication, and it also leans a lot on language teaching, particularly English language teaching. And the idea is English as a foreign language. And from then on, it branches to several branches. Okay, so you have English for specific purposes or general English. When you have English for specific purposes, you have English for science and technology, English for business, English for occupational purposes, English for academic purposes, and many others. So ESP could be English for occupational purposes, English for professional purposes, or English for academic purposes. So EOP, English for occupational purposes. Maybe it's pre-service, in-service, or post-service. It could be English for professional purposes. You want to study a specific discipline, or maybe it's a school subject. And it involves independent or integrated study when it's a school subject. And of course, like in a specific discipline, there's pre-study, in-study, and post-study. I'm sure you're all very familiar with this because you have training before you become a teacher. You have training when you become a teacher. Maybe you have specific training involving what kind of language is used in Montessori's. And then finally, after some time, you take a sabbatical and you take a rest and you try to uh, engage in specific studies that help enhance your English, maybe like linguistics or like literature. Now you can also classify English by in ESP by discipline. It could be English for academic purposes or English for occupational purposes. So if it's English for academic purposes, it's more about trying to learn a particular subject. So if it's about trying to learn a specific subject, then it's English for academic purposes. If it's for occupational purposes, then it could be for professional or vocational purposes. Here are basic features of an ESP course. First, it's goal oriented. You really need to have a specific goal because without the goal, you cannot really design an ESP. It's also based on needs analysis. That's why I asked you to do a needs analysis. It's time bound. The idea is given a good amount of time, a realistic amount of time, you are able to accomplish the goals. And definitely, it's for adults, it's not for children. Okay, it's people who are using English for a specific purpose. And it's discipline specific, it's not generic English. So, ESP is very specific, and because of that, it produces motivation. It because it's focused on the learner's need. It wastes notes. It doesn't waste time on other non-essential ideas. Actually, class, for example, several years ago, we had a course called transformational grammar, which for me is for many students, it's actually a waste of time. Transformational grammar, no need for that really for most English teachers. And ESP is also relevant to the learner. Okay, transformational grammar, the one I taught, I would say it's really irrelevant to many learners. Okay, but ESP is very relevant to the learner. And the ideal for ESP is that it is successful in imparting learning. And because of that, it's more cost effective than general English. Okay, so it's more cost effective than general English because you're focusing on what people really need to specifically learn, what learners specifically need to learn. Now, there are two kinds of content when it comes to ESP. Carrier content refers to subject matter of an exercise, the topic. The real content refers to the language or skill content of an exercise. So the carrier content is the topic, the subject matter. The real content is the skill in ESP. Now, here are several issues in ESP. Which forms or structures do you use? What vocabulary do you need to focus on? And how do you acquire them? So, class, for example, there was a group who approached the English department many years ago. They wanted the English department to teach English for lawyers. The problem with that is English teachers are not familiar with the vocabulary of lawyers. So vocabulary is a very important issue. That's why when it comes to ESP, it's so much ideal if the English teacher is also uh, a practitioner. So the teacher is not just an English teacher, the teacher should also be a practitioner. So that person, if he's a practitioner, would be familiar with grammar, vocabulary, with the discourse and the genre of that particular field. So classes, as I have told you, ESP is actually the most lucrative kind of teaching. It's the most lucrative kind of teaching, but it's also the most difficult. Imagine you will teach English to lawyers, you will teach English to doctors. That will require a really good salary, but then you probably have to be a practitioner too. So you would be a doctor who is teaching English. Two would be doctors or doctors who are not or who come uh, from another culture and they need to learn English for practicing medicine in the United States, in the UK, in the Philippines. Imagine how much salary you could command for that. But then you have to be a practitioner too. Okay, when it comes to grammar, how much priority is paid to grammatical weakness depends on the learner's level in English and whether priority needs to be given to grammatical accuracy or to fluency in the language. Class, there's always two cases, two important issues in language: accuracy and fluency. So when it comes to grammar, the idea there is how accurate are you in the grammar and how accurate do you need to be? Like when you're a bus driver, how accurate should you be? Class, I've watched a case of an airplane crash where there was a miscommunication between the pilots. For example, the pilot said to the captain said to the co-pilot, push up push up the lever, push up. The problem, class, is when you push the lever, the lever, the plane will go down. And so there was miscommunication. So in that case, accuracy was quite important. But maybe in other cases, you don't really need to be that accurate in your grammar. Okay? So of course you have key grammatical forms, logical connectors, nominalization, meaning these are words that are not objects but are considered as nouns. They're not objects but they are considered nouns, like exposure. Okay, and so there are many other words that are key to grammatical forms. When it comes to vocabulary, there are three levels. There's technical or specialist vocabulary, there's semi-technical and core business vocabulary, and there's general and non-academic vocabulary. So, specialist vocabulary, that's very, very important. You need to understand that it's something that is very, it has a specific nuance of meaning. Then you have semi-technical and core business vocabulary. Maybe other practitioners also use this kind of vocabulary. Like due diligence. What do you mean by due diligence? It means exhausting everything to make sure that a transaction is legal. That's what you mean by due diligence. And you have general and non-academic vocabulary. So here's an example. English for business and economics. Re-engineering of a company is the creation of a process that works out of one that doesn't. You re-engineer something. For English for vocational purposes, aviation English, you have air traffic control, aerodynamics, navigation, aircraft performance, aerial navigation, weight and balance. So English for business and economics, you have purchasing power parity. It's a concept in international finance. The idea is how much power do you have in purchasing? Okay. How much are you able to buy something? Okay, purchasing power. Maybe your money is not as useful as sought after as another kind of money. So, for example, you buy something using yen, or you buy something using won, or you buy something using renminbi, Chinese renminbi. Which one has more power? The yen, the won, or the renminbi? Okay, so that's a term for business and economics. Of course, you're familiar with PPP in language pedagogy, presentation, practice, and production. You present the grammatical structure. Your students will practice them with the teacher, and then you will do production. Maybe a skit, maybe a use of the grammatical structure. And two terms that are similar might actually mean different. For example, in aviation English, the word flyer means pilot, but in marketing, the word flyer means an ad circular, a piece of paper. For English for medical purposes, it could PPD would be purified protein derivative. It's a skin test for detecting TB. Okay, PPD. My daughter and my son were given that, and if the resulting scar or rash is more than 10 millimeters long, then that means they have tuberculosis, children's tuberculosis, which is not really communicable. But for marketing, it could mean packs per day. How much packs were you able to give per day? Okay. And then for text types, you have lots and lots of them. You have travel brochures, train timetables, bus schedules, notices, public signs, directories, catalogs, and you need to know how to read them. Class, the, one of the difficulties in writing a letter has to do with writing the province class. That's a very basic thing that even some of my colleagues find difficult in doing. For example, when you give the street, you give the number of the house, then you give the street. The street means the street that you put means the street from which that house belongs to, in which the house belongs to. And the subdivision, when you write subdivision, it means the subdivision in which the street belongs to. And city means, or municipality or city means the municipality or city to which that subdivision belongs to. And province class means the province in which that city or municipality belongs to. And many people make a mistake in that case. For example, they would say 349 Rosana Street, San Miguel Subdivision, Bacoor City, Negros Oriental. Because when they read province, they thought they're talking about they thought it the requirement is the province from which they came from. No, when you have province there, it means the province or the province to which the the city or municipality belongs. And I've seen so many mistakes of that. Okay, number one, St. Anne Drive, San Miguel 2, Bacoor City, Capas, Tarlac, Tarlac. Okay, so many people make that mistake. You need to be familiar with text types, otherwise you will read it wrong. Okay, so for example, when you see a letter envelope, where is the addressee? Is it on the side or on in the middle? Okay. When it comes to poems, should you treat them literally, or do you understand the concept of exaggeration and hyperbole? Okay, so you need to understand text types when it comes to ESP. Another aspect of ESP is discourse analysis, which is the system of analysis of clause relations in written text. How do those clauses combine to produce a unified message? So its aim is to describe relations that are found in all texts. It's concerned with similarities between texts. So discourse has the idea of how do sentences combine to produce a particular message. And when you analyze a discourse, you try to find out the content. How do those components synergize in order to produce a particular purpose? And oftentimes, it's concerned with similarities between texts. Okay, that could be an example of what we call intertextuality. How is a text influenced by other texts? Then you also have genre analysis, which may be used as a classificatory system. It reveals essential differences between the both genre, or what we call text type studied, and other genres, and also between the various subgenres. So, for example, for this genre, what is characteristic of it? My classic example class is the book of Proverbs in the Bible. The book of Proverbs is not a book of promises. And you can see lots of exceptions to what the book of Proverbs says. Because it doesn't really explain eternal truths, it explains practical observations. On the other hand, you have the book of Revelation, which is uh, which is full of apocalyptic images that you don't normally see. It's something that you cannot interpret literally. Maybe you can interpret the book of Proverbs literally, but not the book of Revelation. For example, when it says that Jesus Christ will come back riding a white horse, does it literally mean that Jesus Christ will come back riding a white horse? Maybe not, because riding a white horse means riding in victory after the war, after you're victorious in war. So, genre analysis is very important. In ESP, it's very important that the learners understand the purpose and structure and features of a particular genre. Then you have register and register analysis. Register is a speech variety used by a particular group of people, usually used sharing the same conception, occupation, or the same interest. And class, register can also vary in the situation. For example, you have the same occupation, but you are in recess. During recess, you don't use formal language. Okay, so register is a very intricate. It's a very intricate. Okay, register is very particular to a situation. Thank you, Jeremiah, for your comment. You made the same mistake before when you were filling out official documents. Yeah, sometimes we make simple mistakes, but that could mean your letter, if you mail it, if you drop it in the mailbox, it would fall into what you call the dead letter office. Okay, there's what you call a dead letter office where messages which are faulty, that's where they go. Okay, particular register often distinguishes itself from other registers by having a number of distinctive words, using words or phrases in a particular way. Like in tennis, the word love means something else from what we actually know, or sometimes by special grammatical constructions, like in legal language. Which means that register analysis looks into the speech variety used by a particular group of people, usually the ones sharing the same occupation or the same interests. Okay, thank you very much, class. We will stop at this point because you already have information overload. Um, the good thing about YouTube Live is when you need to go back because you misunderstood something, you failed to comprehend something that the speaker or the professor is saying, then you can simply review back. Unlike in Google Meets or Zoom, you have to wait for the recording to come. By that time, you already got lost. Okay. Plus, when it comes to YouTube Live, I don't need to rework the recording in such a way that it's useful for reviewing reviewing what do you call this, a particular video. Okay, like a while ago, I failed to use YouTube. I had to use Google Meets. When the recording came, I had to delete certain parts to make it useful for discussion, for viewing in review. Okay, I wonder if you have any questions. I wonder if you have questions. If you have questions, you can type into the chat box. Or how do you feel now? Can you put another emoticon? Is it the same emoticon that you will put, or is it different now? Can you type an emoticon to show how you feel now? Choose an emoticon. Okay, I'm so happy to see more positive emoticons right now. Okay, if there are no more questions, thank you very much, class. I'll see you on Thursday. So you are dismissed. Thank you very much. Bye bye.